welcome back to another reading and correcting of Bottom Rung. With me, Kindar, the Tiger Writes. And today we are doing chapter 6. Oh, wait. Ty is also here. The Tiger Supervisor is here. I can't get this done properly without him. We're doing, as demonstrated by me bleeping this up. And we are doing chapter 61 today. Where's my cursor? There's my cursor. The buddinglings were hard. They thought he and his friend had gotten strong. Okay, you know what? This is going to be a different paragraph. The buddinglings were hard. Tibs thought he and his friends had gotten strong enough to make quick work of the buddinglings. After all, this time, the ratlings had barely hurt anyone. He limped through the rattling camp, helping Karina. One of the buddinglings had hit her in the head with a club. It had been a glancing blow, but it had left her with a hard time staying up. Kumdar had had to pull Jackal out when a coordinated attack broke both the fighter's legs, and with Jackal's Jackal injured, they could no longer hope to win. Let's I pulled Jackal out when he coordinated attack broke both the fighter's legs, and with Jackal injured, they could no longer hope to win. Tibs had wrapped his legs in his essence once they were outside the room so he could stand and stumble about. They'd retreated with only two dead buddinglings to their collective names and tired. They'd retreated with only two dead buddinglings to their collective names. Karina stumbled about. Damn it. You know what? So you could stand and walk. This is, yeah. Karina stumbled again, and Tibs worried. He had wanted to do something to her head, but if too much pressure on Mez's bruises caused him pain, what would too much of it on her head do? When they reached the pool room, Tibs stopped with his team. Tibs? Jekyll asked, leaning against the wall. His features were pained, and Tibs wished he could heal with his essence instead of simply bandaging the injuries. Can you get us across? Tibs stared at the fighter. Then, remember, he was the one with water essence. He checked his reserve. He'd lost little in the battle, so that wouldn't be a problem. I don't know. I'm tired, and it's hard to focus. Maybe the bridge is trap-free, the fighter said, then winced as he motioned toward it. Like last time? Tib shook his head. That was a one-time thing. He said he'd have something in place the next time, that we'd have to work for it. He sat Karina, then, and she looked around. Her eyes were unfocused. He walked to the edge and looked at the water. Freezing his essence once in the water was easy, but he didn't have enough to spread it to the entire pool this time. This time, in his state, there was no way he could grasp more essence as he worked to keep adding to the pool. He frowned. There was something there. Something about when he'd frozen it, how he had... Tibs! Jekyll called. He was down, knife out, looking around for the coming attack. If Stowe was sending more rats at him, he was going to be pissed. This was a trap room, and there were no creatures in trap rooms. Nothing came of it. It was only him and his team. He looked at the fighter. So why the yell? You are definitely out of it if that's what it took to get your attention, Jekyll said with a chuckle once again. Before you walked off, you said the dungeon would have something in place to turn off the traps for our next run. Tibs nodded. And this is our next run. Tibs had to think about it, then nodded. Maybe that will be easier than freezing the water? Tibs looked around. I don't see any lever or buttons or locks. Commodore chuckled, then groaned. He'd received many bruises as he covered their retreat, and Tib's essences had been too low for him to offer much help after the wrap of Jackal's legs. Would they be something obvious like that? Mez asked. If the triggers are made of essence, wouldn't it make sense whatever the dungeon did now would be like that too? Tibs nodded, but it was a few seconds later that he understood what the archer meant. He sheathed his knife and stood. He sensed as far as he could. The first trigger registered, the two lines moving at different speed. He stepped to one side of the platform and looked at the ledge. The stones were still only wide enough for him to tiptoe on them. No essence there. On the other side of the platform, he felt the essence, 2 and 0 paces along the ledge. He groaned. Of course it would be there. Stowe had wanted to force them to use the ledge. If the traps on the bridge and the size of the pool wouldn't make it happen, he used this to do it. He tried to remember what he'd felt when he'd used his essence to feel around the cracks in the ledge, but all he remembered was that there had been no water there. The essence he felt now was part of the wall, not the ledge. He looked at the wall, and it was cracked and uneven. He could use them to help as he moved. But even if he weren't injured, he didn't see his friends managing the crossing this way, especially if there were traps. He looked at the ledge suspiciously. There would be traps along it. This was a trap room, after all. This is going to take a while, he told his friends, who were already seated. Jekyll smiled at him, and Tibs returned to what he needed to do, reach the essence pattern. It was too far for him to make out the details, and it extended beyond what he could sense. Stowe had made sure that for him to make out the details... Stowe had made sure that even Tibs had to step on the ledge to resolve this. He placed his toe on the ledge. There's a lot of ledges there. This is going to be a while, those friends said. Returning needed, so this was too far for him to make a detail extend beyond what he could say. Stowe had made sure that even Tibs had to step on the ledge. Placed his toes on it and slowly added more weight until it supported him. The likeliest system, if essence wasn't used, was for a section of the ledge to be too weak to support him. Each section was 3 paces across, but he couldn't count on the whole section being in the same condition. Stowe was too clever for that. Fingers in the cracks, he stepped onto the ledge fully. He made it halfway to the second section before stone gave out under his foot. He'd been feeling for weakness on the ledge, so with holding on to the crack, he stayed on it. This wasn't a killing trap, the way the triggers were on the bridge. If he fell in the water, at most, Stowe would have a good laugh. He had a better sense of the pattern now. It took half the wall in height and was nearly the same in width. Studying the details as he moved closer, his foot flying out from under him, taking the other with it, and he cursed himself hanging by his fingers. By hanging by his fingers for getting distracted. He got his feet back under him and looked at the ledge. This one hadn't broken off, but the section Tibs stepped on was as slick as ice as the ice his water created. After testing the rest of the ledge with his foot, the rest of the ledge his foot could reach, he stepped over it. He stopped once he was at the center of the pattern and studied it. There's no need for the den here. And studied it. It was a maze of some sort. line crisscrossed each other up, down, and deeper into the wall with 2 hands by 2 hand span. He couldn't tell which essence was needed to solve it, but since people only had one element, this could be solved with water. It had to be because he didn't have enough reserve to use any of the other. He located the end of multiple lines and touched it with his essence, only to have that slide around and over it. He moved to another of the ends, then another and another. He found one accepting his water on the 1 and 2 tries. 1 second. How would how would he resolve 12 on the 1 and 2 try? Yeah, on 1 and 2nd. 1 and 2nd try. Second. Second. One and second try. Counted 4 and 8 ends. If one was the beginning and the other the end, that meant they were. He rested his head against the cool stone. Later, he'd ask Karina how many lines that meant. He pushed his essence into the line and discovered another part of the challenge. The line didn't hold the essence. He had to keep it in place, guide it around the bends. He needed to fill the line with his essence. He smiled and filled the entire maze with it. Nothing happened. But he couldn't sense the bridge from where he was. Someone checked the triggers. He called. It's still there, Mez replied after a few seconds. So Sto had thought of that. Still, that meant he didn't have to guide the essence, just place it along the line. He groaned as he realized the complexity of the maze meant he had to follow the line. He couldn't tell where one was compared to the other otherwise. He was too tired for this. But the alternative was the bridge or the water, and his team was too tired for either. Everything Sto did was about forcing them to improve. This was the same. At least, if he failed, it wouldn't kill them. He couldn't drown. He didn't think of how long it took for him. He didn't think of how long it took him to trace the line and leave essence on. Once he reached the other end, he couldn't feel his fingers. Maz, check it. Still there and moving, the archer replied to his side. What else could it be? It had it. He had it from one end to the other, and the essence followed it. Mostly, he realized as he studied it. In places, the essence spilled over and onto other lines, being kept out of them only by whatever Sto had in place to force him to find the correct line for his essence. Give me a break, he grumbled. How could Sto expect him to have the energy left after all this? He didn't get. You know what? He didn't get a comment from the dungeon. It was for the best. Tibs didn't need the distraction. He mapped the entire maze for his element in his mind. Hopefully, Sto wouldn't change the layout. Controlling his essence over such a convoluted length was difficult enough. How long would he need to hold it in place once he had it all within the line? One problem at a time. He found the first place his essence leaked through the path. He found the first place his essence leaked through the path's wall, and he tightened it. Keeping hold of it, he moved one. He moved one to the next one. He moved to the next one. Then the next. On the fourth, he realized he'd lost hold of the first one. Chicken. It had expanded past the wall. Focused on maintaining hold of the other three and brought this one back in. He kept hold of them as he searched for the fifth, and as he worked on it, he added it to them before moving on. He lost count at some point, only knowing he had kept them all in his mind at the same time. He didn't even know how quickly or slowly he worked, only that each time he finished one, more of the path was visible to his sense. Not only in a Not only in a way that he could tell there was essence, but he could tell the shape of it as it flowed through the path. Wait, it flowed? Click. With a curse, he focused again. How much had he lost in his distraction? None. He could feel it there, flowing through the path, connected to something he couldn't sense. He realized it was out of his control, and the low level of his amulet confirmed it. The path had changed, and he couldn't act through it. The ground shook. Air rushed around him with a sound Tibbs didn't understand. Loud, like he'd fallen off the mountain, the wind rushing past him. But so much louder there was water in the air too. He clung to the wall and wondered what he'd screwed up. Maybe this trap was going to kill him after all. Would he get a second chance? Did he have enough essence to do it again? Get it right? He screamed as a hand on his shoulder at a hand. He screamed at a hand on his shoulder and he looked over it. Kumdar stood behind him. How did he walk on air like that? Tibbs looked down, his heart barely slowing, and the pool was gone. No water was left, not even the air over the pool. It was all one floor, even with the ledge and the bridge. I believe you have beaten the dungeon's puzzle, the cleric said. Beaten? Tibbs snickered. If anything had been beaten, it was his head. The snicker turned into laughter. Stowe had beaten his head so hard, over and over, that Tibbs couldn't think anymore. The only thing in his head now was the maze, and all the essence still had in place, flowing from one end to the other without ever stopping, arms wrapped around him. I've got him, someone said. The voice was familiar, comforting. They lifted him. I've got you, buddy. You can rest. Rest. Could he rest? Would the pattern let him? Rest sounded good. Yes, rest sounded wonder. Waking up was difficult. With it came an awareness of all the essence around him. Air, fire, earth, and water were everywhere. Then there were the people moving around, below, and above. Why couldn't they all just leave him alone and let him rest? He'd earned it. Jekyll had said so. Here, a woman said, and the smell of spicy meat registered. Tibbs reached, and his finger ended in something wet, hot, and gooey. She chuckled. It's too easier with a spoon. He cracked an eye open. Karina held the bowl for his hand. Karina held the bowl his hand rested in. He considered closing his eye again, but his stomach rumbled. Food was a better idea. How are you doing? She asked once he sat and took the bowl from her. He licked his fingers clean. Did we have anything left after paying for Mez's bow? The archer had to use the bow against the bunnyling, so the guild would have forced them to keep it. Only a few quains and the clothing that wasn't woven through with essence. I was hoping we could have kept one of the amulets for you. Tibbs shrugged. There's going to be more amulets. The stew wasn't as hot as Tibbs had preferred, but it was still good. Tibbs? She hesitated. Did the dungeon do what you told it to? She watched him. You said we needed a bow for Mez, and there was one. A bow made up for fire. Tibbs shrugged again, then spoon to his mouth. Shrugged again. Then, spoon to his mouth. He's got rules he has to follow, but he doesn't always like it. He ate and chewed, hoping that was enough, but her dismayed expression made him continue as he swallowed. I wasn't sure he'd do it, but I figured it wouldn't hurt to make a suggestion. How does a dungeon have rules to follow, Tibbs? She looked thoughtfully. Maybe I can ask. No. Tibbs, someone has to know something about this. He rubbed her face. I don't think so. She rubbed her face. None of this is supposed to be possible. Dungeons don't talk. They don't think. They certainly don't have rules. They're like the mountain they grow from. They just are. If this isn't something that's just been out of my... Wait, what? If this isn't something that's just been out of my reach... okay, all right. If this isn't something I just haven't read about yet. If no one They just are. If this isn't something I just haven't read about yet, if no one actually knows anything about this, we have to study this. Tibs looked at her confusion giving way to eagerness. She wanted to study Stowe, figure out what made him him. He understood her. Stowe was someone she hadn't known existed, hadn't been told didn't exist. She was curious, and like him, she wanted to sate it. Only the damage doing that would be much bigger than any question he'd ever asked. How are they going to study him, Karina? He didn't make it personal. If he could keep this about other people, it would be easier for her to accept, he hoped. He isn't going to bother listening to them, and they can't hear him. I'm the only one who can. When they ask me how it is I can do that, what am I supposed to tell them? Do I tell them about my 4 audiences when it's only supposed to be possible to have one? About my element that you'd never even known existed? Is the guild going to ever let me go if I'm the only way their only way to talk to the dungeon? She stood and paced. We said that the dungeon doesn't want to eat us. Its role is to make us stronger. That dying is a consequence of that, not the reverse. She nodded as she stopped and looked at him. Once you've explained that to them, they won't have a reason to send so many people in to their death when a new dungeon appears. Do you really think the guild is going to change how it does things? It sent us to die. Why would knowing that how would knowing that it's not what the dungeon wants change anything? The more of us it gets to eat, the stronger the more of us he gets to eat, the stronger he gets. That doesn't change, but there's no need for it. I don't think they care. Sending a lot of runner to die is how they feed a new dungeon. It's always been how things have been done. I refuse to believe that. She replied, there has to have been a time before the guild. That was when kings, you know what? That was when the kings fought over control of the dungeons. That's what my teacher told me. The guild stepped in to stop that. But it happened so long ago they probably don't remember how it was before the kings fought. But it doesn't mean things have to remain the way they are. Tibs, you could improve things for all of us. He shook his head. Things don't improve for folks like us. There's always going to be someone with their boots on our neck telling us what to do. The only way to avoid that is to stay in the cracks and live off the broken coins and rotten food they fall in. He looked at his empty bowl. We've been pulled out of the crack now, and I wouldn't go back to it. Telling them would give you the power to ask for better things. Tibs chuckled. You trust the guild that much? I don't mean the guild, she replied defensively. They aren't the only ones out there. There are better people. You mean the purity clerics? He wondered what someone like Hightower would make of him and his claims of being able to talk to a dungeon. I mean the sages. He nodded. How many of them aren't sorcerers? She hesitated. Who else but someone with an element could help? I doubt the kings would go against the guild. Would anyone without an element even understand what it means? How many people out there with an element don't owe the guild or the clerics? She sighed. It can't just be us. Once we're free of the guild, you'll be able to do all the research you want on the dungeon. He smiled. I'm not going to mind helping. When we're free, she said. She said, doubtful expression reflecting how he felt. Would they ever be free? How many ways did the guild have to keep them indebted? They had had a long time to perfect their system. Rubbed his left wrist. How far would he go to be free of them? And this concludes chapter 61 of Bottom Rung. If you're enjoying this, please subscribe, hit the bell, hit the thumbs up, and share. If you want to read the story, it's available on Royal Road. The link is in the notes. Book 2 should also be up there at the time of this posting. Anytime after that, it's definitely there. And the link to my Patreon is also there, should you want to support me. And with that, I shall wish you a good day.